Stop scrolling. Open your Chase app right now. In 2020, you had $100,000 in cash. Today, you still have $100,000, but you're 30% poorer without spending a single dollar. I know because it happened to me. The reason is one number: $37 trillion. Give me 60 seconds, and I'll prove it. Let me tell you how I learned the phrase cash is trash the hard way. In January 2020, I had $88,000 sitting in my savings account. I was 29, living in Phoenix, and I thought I was being responsible. The bank paid me 0.5% interest and called it FDIC insured. Safe. I didn't buy crypto. I didn't day trade GameStop. I just saved, like my dad taught me. Today, July 2026, I have $92,200 in that same account after 6 years of interest. I should feel richer. But last month I walked into a Ford dealer to buy the same F-150X I could have paid cash for in 2020. Back then, it was $41,000 out the door. Last month, the sticker was $58,900. My safe money now buys 30% less truck. I didn't lose a trade. I didn't get scammed. I held cash, and cash robbed me. That's when I went down the rabbit hole. I found a billionaire investor named Dalio. He runs Bridgewater, the biggest hedge fund in the world, and he's studied every debt crisis for the last 500 years. In January 2020, right as COVID hit, Dalio tweeted 3 words that sounded insane at the time. He said, "Cash is trash." Everyone was panicking into cash. He said, "Don't." Everyone thought he was wrong. In 2026, here's the scoreboard. My $88,000 became $92,200, but it buys 30% less. Dalio was right. Cash was trash, and the reason is sitting on the U.S. Treasury website right now. $37.4 trillion. That's the official national debt as of June 30th, 2026. But the number that matters isn't the debt, it's the interest payment. For 2026 alone, the U.S. government will pay $1.26 trillion just in interest, not principal, just interest. That's more than we spend on the entire military. It's more than Social Security. It's the single biggest line item in the federal budget, and we're still adding $1.9 trillion in new debt every single year. So, I asked myself a basic question. How do you pay a $1.26 trillion interest bill when you're already $1.9 trillion in the hole? I studied what countries have done for 5,000 years. There are only 2 answers. 1, you default. You tell the world we're not paying. The U.S. will never do that on purpose, because it would nuke the treasury market and the dollar overnight. 2, you print the money. You have the Federal Reserve create new dollars to buy your own debt. I watched it happen. The money supply went up 40% in 24 months. That's why my groceries are up 22% since 2021. That's why my rent in Phoenix went from $1,400 to $2,100. That's why my car insurance doubled. The dollars didn't get more valuable. We just made more dollars. And when you make more dollars, but you don't make more houses, more trucks, or more eggs, every dollar buys less. That's inflation, not the 2.9% CPI number they show on CNBC. I'm talking about real life. For my family in Arizona, real inflation in 2026 is 5.8%. I track it. Food, energy, insurance, property tax. Your bank is giving you 4.6% in a high-yield savings account today. That sounds great compared to 2020. But if I'm earning 4.6% and my life is inflating at 5.8%, I am guaranteed to get poorer by 1.2% every year. That's what Dalio meant by trash. It's a guaranteed loss, approved by the government, and marketed as safe. After I figured this out, my first instinct was, fine, I'll just put everything in the S&P 500. Stocks always go up. But then I remembered a principle I read in Dalio's book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. He said, don't make investment decisions based on the last 10 years. From 2010 to 2021, stocks were magic. But why? Because interest rates went from 4% to zero, and the Fed printed $9 trillion. That was a one-time tailwind. In 2026, all three are reversed. Interest rates are 5.25%, not zero. The Fed is doing QT, not QE. They're pulling $95 billion out of the market every month, and globalization is reversing with tariffs and chip bans. Plus, stocks are expensive. The S&P 500 CAPE ratio is 33 right now. The average since 1900 is 17. I'm paying double the historical price for every dollar of earnings. I studied what happened the last time U.S. debt to GDP was this high. In 1945, it was 119% after World War II. Today it's 124%. What did the government do in 1945? They capped interest rates and let inflation run 6 to 7% for a decade. It's called financial repression. They held rates below inflation on purpose, so the debt would shrink in real terms. Savers got destroyed. Bondholders got destroyed. The $37 trillion tells me financial repression is back. Your cash melts so their debt feels lighter. So, what do you actually do? I'm not a billionaire. I can't call the Fed, but I can use Dalio's framework. His number one principle is diversification is the only free lunch. In 2022, I was 80% S&P 500 and 20% cash. Inflation hit 9%. Stocks dropped 19%. I lost money on both sides. That's when I realized being 100% in dollars is not diversified. It's a concentrated bet that the 1974 to 2020 system lasts forever. So, I changed my portfolio. I keep 10% in cash for emergencies because life happens. I keep 30% in U.S. stocks for growth. I move 20% into international developed stocks, Japan, Switzerland, Canada. If the dollar falls 20%, those go up 20% in dollar terms even if the companies do nothing. I put 15% in short-term tips because they adjust for CPI, and I put 25% in gold and energy commodities. Why? Because the government can't print gold. It can't print oil. I'm trying not to get poor slowly. Dalio calls this building a portfolio for being wrong. Because when debt is $37 trillion, nobody knows what happens next. If inflation goes to 10%, my gold and tips help. If we get a 2008-style deflation crash, my treasury bills hold up, and I can buy stocks 40% cheaper. If the dollar is fine and stocks boom, my 50% in equities grows. If the dollar loses reserve status over 15 years, my non-dollar assets carry me. I don't predict. I prepare. Here's the pattern Dalio found going back 500 years. Every reserve currency fails. Spain in the 1600s, the Dutch in the 1780s, British in 1945. The U.S. is 80 years into its run. For 50 years, the petrodollar forced the world to use dollars. Saudi Arabia sold all in dollars and recycled them into treasuries. That system is breaking. On June 12, 2026, Saudi Arabia settled an all deal with China in digital yuan. BRICS Plus is now 10 countries, 45% of world population, and they built a settlement system that bypasses the dollar. Foreign central banks own the lowest percentage of U.S. debt since 2003, Dalio wrote. When empires decline, their currency declines first. The $37 trillion means we're in the late stage. The Fed can't raise rates without blowing up the government. They can't cut rates without blowing up inflation. They are trapped. And when governments are trapped, they choose printing. Printing melts cash. Printing makes real assets go up. Dalio made a brutal mistake in 1982. Went on TV and predicted a depression. The market boomed instead. He lost so much money that Bridgewater went down to one employee, him. He had to borrow $4,000 from his dad to make payroll. He calls it the best thing that ever happened to him. His principle, from that pain. Pain plus reflection equals progress. My pain was watching $88,000 buy 30% less truck. My reflection was studying 500 years of debt cycles. My progress is not holding trash anymore. So tonight, do what I did. Open your 401k or your Fidelity app. Don't look at the balance. Look at the pie chart. What percent is pure U.S. dollars? Cash, money market, U.S. bonds, S&P 500. All of that is a dollar bet. If your pie chart is 90% U.S. dollars, you are breaking the only free lunch. You are betting the system of the last 50 years lasts forever. The $37 trillion, BRICS, and 5.8% real inflation are all telling you that bet is expiring. You don't have to panic. You just have to adapt. Because the people who adapt to the big debt cycle keep their wealth. The people who hold cash get melted. That's what I learned from Dalio. That's what the $37 trillion is forcing on all of us. If this made you think differently, hit the like button. Subscribe for next week. The 4 assets that survived every currency collapse. And comment below. What's your real inflation rate versus your savings rate? Do the math. If your cash is trash, it's time to know. I read every comment. See you next time.